All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome into our weekly vRx demo. Appreciate you guys jumping on. Just for anyone who hasn't joined one of these before, this is essentially going to be a straight to the point. We're doing no slides, just focused on the product. Look at what vRx does, high level overview. If you guys have questions, anything that you want to be able to dig into a bit more deeply that catches your eye, just drop them in the chat. Let me know. We can take this wherever you want. I think we have a full hour booked. It'll probably be 30 to 45 minutes. Not that full hour time, but excited to walk through it all with you guys. So the core challenge that we're solving with the vRx platform is addressing the vulnerability management lifecycle. You have a process of identifying vulnerabilities across organizations, in some cases mitigating them. So when there's no patch available, being able to perform custom remediations or temporary compensating controls that you implement. And then ultimately, the end goal is always to be able to actually fix the problem, right? You want to be able to apply that software manufacturer's recommended fix, which is going to come in the form of a patch. And then last of all, you need to be able to automatically validate that entire process, right? You need to have a way to systematically verify that those patches have been applied correctly. Now, unfortunately, so many companies, this flow is spread across not only multiple teams, but multiple tools as well. So you have silos in different teams, you've got multiple tools, you're sending, CSV emails back and forth between the teams, trying to communicate, hey, can you patch these? Yes, they're patched. Can you check that they're done? And it's like, yeah, most of them are done, but these ones, why didn't they work? And you're just stuck in this vicious loop. And then meanwhile, more and more vulnerabilities, like an exponential number of vulnerabilities, are being released every single month. And so it can be nearly impossible to get ahead of that. With vRx, we're going to be able to take that entire process end to end, unify it into a single platform, single agent, and add automation into that process to the extent that you're comfortable with it, right? We want to be able to adapt to the individual enterprises, but where you can automate as much as possible so you and your team can focus on the high value activities that actually require, user interactions versus all of the low hanging fruit where you're just trying to keep up with basic vulnerabilities for Adobe Reader or something like that. So with that, we'll just jump right into the demo environment so you can take a look at how we're actually performing this. So my screen should be sharing. Yeah, looks like it is. And you have a view of this primary dashboard. What happens is this is an agent-based technology. You can deploy it across, all of your Windows, Linux, Mac operating systems, all major variants of those operating systems it's going to be available for. Installation is very straightforward. If you deployed any other tools at scale, you can either package it up through an existing software management platform, or there's individual scripts that you can see here, or you can always, we have a tool we call vDeployer that you can leverage to use a PowerShell scripts essentially to push it out across the environment. Now, once we've actually began the installation of the agent, we actually will automatically begin scanning. So this is kind of a key foundational component of the platform. We're not doing this scanning based on a schedule. You're not worrying about assessments, catching endpoints when they're online, or trying to time it to minimize, the impact across your network. It's going to be happening at time of installation, and then from there we'll actually monitor for changes going ahead. So when we detect a Windows event that, hey, add remove programs has been modified, boom, trigger a rescan. And then ultimately, if nothing has been, no changes have been made on the endpoint after 6 hours, we will still initiate a rescan on those devices in a throttled configuration to ensure that we're checking for any new vulnerabilities that could have released since the last scan has been performed. These scans are going to be happening in a throttled configuration. So I know resource consumption is always a priority. Typically, it's going to be, it's different when it's idling mode versus the scanning mode, and we have those numbers available in a table on our KB site. I'll post those into chat towards the end here if you guys have any questions about that. Now, once we've installed the agent, we've started scanning, and we identify vulnerabilities across those operating systems, it's all ingested back into the console. Typically, within about an hour of installing the agent, you'll have that data ingested back here into vRx. Now, every tool under the sun that's scanning for vulnerabilities has the basic CVSS information. We're talking everything that's available in NVD, where you rank it by your critical highs, mediums, lows, NAs, and so on. But what a lot of products fail to do is contextualize this information for your individual environments. We all know that that score doesn't mean that it's the same score for you, depending on how you're using the asset, depending on the state of your environment. So we take an approach to contextualizing that using dynamic labels that we call X tags. So these are essentially labels that we can apply either based on the endpoint and its behavior or information that we have about the vulnerabilities. This could be things like looking at the device and saying, hey, is this external facing, right? If this is facing the whole world, even if the CVSS score associated with it is only a 6, we're going to bump that to a 10 because it could be a high priority for threat actors. Same things with high usage. Are there admins logged in? And that presents additional potential lateral movement concerns. We incorporate those into that calculation we're doing. And then we also look at that vulnerability data as well. So identifying if this is like, a really trendy vulnerability. Everyone's using it because it's really easy. Known exploits is associated with end-of-life software. All of those things we're evaluating. And then we apply this newly reprioritized view of what you can address first in your environment. So based on the vulnerability scanning data, you've been able to find everything, and we can move into actually taking action. This is kind of the secret sauce of vRx, right? We're going to allow you to find everything and immediately pivot off of that identification into fixing it. So when I click on this explore for these high risks that are calculated, excuse me, you're going to see all of the associated patches and potential mitigations for those applications. So if we were to look at something like VLC, you'll see this little icon. This indicates that there is a patch available. Pivot here, you can go to Patch Management tab and optionally deploy the patch or choose the version you want to deploy right from this screen. But before we get into the patching process and talk about the automation, I do want to talk about that mitigation step that I mentioned earlier. In between finding it and fixing it, in some cases, you've got, like a 0 day, where when a 0 day drops, the vulnerability definition is out there. Everyone can search for it, but it could be days or in some cases even weeks until the software manufacturer releases a patch for that particular product. And in the interim, you still have a responsibility to identify it everywhere and perform whatever mitigations that you can in the interim. We have a really cool technology for helping these situations that we call X-Protect. It's essentially a virtual patch. So we can leverage our agent that's installed to do an in-memory protection of a targeted application. So this is a very targeted approach to protection that provides you with that temporary control where we can monitor, we can detect attempts at exploitation of those vulnerabilities, and actually intercept them. So if you turn on the full protection mode, not only will we send out an alert to your SIEM, but we'll be able to simultaneously block that call as many times as it happens, leveraging our agent. And all of that's done without modifying the underlying application itself. The other really common use case I see for X-Protect is some products like I always pick on .NET. .NET's a fun one. If you patch this, across a business enterprise, there's a good chance you might break something on it. It's usually a critical business app server that you have, and it has a dependency on .NET or on Java. We want to give you the flexibility to work with those nuances in the environment. So when there is .NET that has a patch available, but you can't push it, turn on X-Protect as that temporary mitigation until you're able to actually finally apply the patch. So for that 1 month that you're waiting for the business app to get updated, you can have Xprotect monitoring those critical CVEs. Now, moving beyond just the Xprotect, we do have the flexibility to run arbitrary scripts through the platform as well. So you can upload your own scripts, perform custom mitigations. If you think of Print Nightmare is always one that comes to mind for me as one of the top mitigations. Print Nightmare came out. It's a very well-known CVE, and it impacted people all across the world. Huge impact. And when it was released, there was temporary mitigations you could perform. I think it was stop the print spool service and change a registry key, right? Those are something that you can script up and deploy through the platform as a mitigation as well. But to make all of this even easier, in many of these cases, when you're doing mitigation of emerging threats, we are actually building this for you already. So we have a repository here of over almost 850 different scripts, and this was at 835 just last week. So we're actively expanding this. And in here, you'll find scripts to deal with the emerging threats. So when you hear about a certain CVE that's impacting you and your enterprise, you can immediately come search in here, and then rather than recreating the wheel, leverage the network effects that we have, because from a customer base, we can provide these, push it once to make it available to you, and then every organization can leverage that mitigation. We do have this repository publicly available. So if you search for, Vicarious and V Society is what we call it, you'll be able to search through all of these scripts. We have a number that are built by our internal security team. And then there's also, we allow customers to contribute as well. So if you've written something that you find to be, extremely valuable or helps with a particular situation, you can always submit it to us. Of course, our security team will vet it, and then we'll get that uploaded for everyone else to be able to take advantage of. Now, once you've been able to identify everything and if optionally mitigate it, if that's going to be relevant, last of all, we want to be able to fix the problem. I showed you how you could pivot into like a one-off fix, but whenever you're pushing a single change or in particular an update, I find it's useful to always ask yourself, is this something that can and should be automated going ahead? For organizations I work with, we often talk about low impact versus high impact changes. And for those low impact changes, in so many of the cases, you'll be able to actually just completely automate them using vRx. If we were to look at something like, I always pick on web browsers because Chrome has like 6 updates a month sometimes, and it's like half of them are 0 days. It's a constant battle. You're playing whack-a-mole everywhere, trying to stay on top of patching these browsers. If we were to bundle them together, and I know we have Edge in here somewhere too. No, Internet Explorer. We'll just stick with these two for now. We're able to bundle those two together, and then we're going to be able to define updates being released based on the severity level associated with it. So if you're dealing with, particular SLAs, you have these agreements to be able to patch, all critical vulnerabilities within 24 hours of the release of the patch. Well, within here, we make it extremely easy to target based on those severity levels and then move into action. So we have some asset selection options. This is very flexible. You can target based on almost any local attribute, and the groups are dynamic. So at time of execution, they evaluate what is targeted by this. It could be anything from custom tags to pulling in domain or ADOU information, or even just, hey, checking everything in this subnet or at this site. You can target based on those data points. And then last of all, you've got your scheduling. So rather than being able to just trigger it once, set up a recurring pattern. For browsers in particular, a lot of this targeting might be for workstations, right? And if we want to catch people at the end of their day before they shut their laptops off, we could set this for something like 5 p.m. in a 2-hour maintenance window. If I save this, that's essentially completely automated patching of those third-party apps across all targeted systems. No more playing catch up with Chrome trying to get every single vulnerability. We're automatically running this every day, checking if it has anything that's critical or high, and if so, patching it. Now, this library, you saw a list here of apps. We have over 11,000 apps that we maintain for you. So you don't have to spend your time trying to find the packages, upload them. You can do that. If you have a custom script or an in-house app, you can absolutely package that up in here. But for anything that's publicly available, we're going to try to help manage that for you so that you're not spending time just doing package management. Now, these automations, they're not going to apply just to the third-party app patching. They're also going to apply to the native OS updates themselves. So if we were to take a look at something like automation of Patch Tuesday, right? We could grab we'll focus on workstations here, Windows 10, Windows 11. Maybe for the Patch Tuesday, we want to target based on all of the different risk levels. That's great. And then for these Patch Tuesdays, typically that is going to require a reboot. So we can turn on that auto reboot and we can actually have interactions with the end users. So if you want to be able to have a pop up to them and say, hey, we know it's the middle of the workday, we don't want to be disruptive because above everything else, we don't want to destroy that end user experience. We want to allow them to snooze for 2 hour periods for a max of, hopefully their workday is not more than 10 hours, but for a max of 10 hours, and then optionally send them a message to let them know that, hey, this is why we're encouraging you to reboot. Then you can couple that with the asset selection that we talked about earlier. I mentioned the flexibility of the asset groups, and I find that that comes in particularly useful for Patch Tuesday because we all know Microsoft has released a bad patch or two in the past, and so you might not want to deploy all of your patches immediately on Patch Tuesday. You want to test it, let it burn in, let it bake for a few days or potentially weeks on some of your endpoints before rolling it out to your entire production environment. With these asset groups, you can create exactly that. Create 3 different asset groups that represent, increasing subsets of your population of your enterprise, and then leverage our relative date targeting. So here, I'm just going to set this out more or less indefinitely till 2048. And with this custom targeting, we can actually do relative date. So we can say, hey, on Patch Tuesday, every single month, we're automatically going to deploy these patches. Now, if you've selected, say, just your test assets here, we'll grab this group. It's got 30 endpoints in it, all these test assets. I save this, boom, just like that, you've automated all of the Patch Tuesday deployments to that test group every single month. Take that to the next logical step. It's how do we roll it out to phase 2? Well, for every one of these automations, you can actually clone them, and then all you do is come in here, change the targeting, choose phase 2 asset group, schedule it maybe for that third day of the or third week of the month, and maybe we want that on Friday and Saturday. Boom, go ahead and save that. And just like that, you've set up a staggered rollout to the patching, where at any point, if you are detecting issues, you can always come in, you can pause these automations, and then if you need to uninstall, you can always leverage that custom scripting that I mentioned earlier to be able to remove that from targeted devices. One other thing I will mention too, in particular for OS updates, is I've worked with some organizations where they have a like list of prerequisites, a preparation that they have to run on some servers before they can patch them every single month. In these automations, you can orchestrate multiple steps together in a series. And so what that means is if you need to be able to have that first step of, okay, we're going to run a custom PowerShell script here before we actually patch the operating system, we make that really easy to do within a single automation. Now, the last thing I'll touch on within the automations is really around reporting because it's great to be able to automate everything, drive down the risk level, fix these vulnerabilities, but ultimately you need to be able to show your leadership that things are being done, that they're being accomplished. And so with that, you can actually tie these reports into these automations. I see we have a question in the chat too. Let's see. Is it possible to automate? So we're running a system, and so as long as the agent's already installed and has permissions, I would assume so. I assume that we'd be able to run still. And let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question there, but yes. So as long because when we have initial installation, that should give us the access to be able to execute. We do have a list of like security exclusions that we recommend for like your EDR, MDR type solutions as well, and I can provide those to you guys in the chat at the end. For the reporting, we do have a couple of options. So you can always send the raw data out. So this is being able to send out, CSV or an Excel file, state the vulnerabilities that you have on your devices. But we also have some pre-built graphical representations as well. So if we were to grab something like this overall summary and switch this to targeting a particular group of users, this is automatically going to email out to everyone on this team. Now, for these teams, you can delegate access as necessary if you have some people that you want to give only read access to, or you only want them to receive these emails but not have access to the console. That's all entirely flat at if I'm current state of the environment, what are the top riskiest applications, most common vulnerabilities that we're dealing with, where should you prioritize your actions next? So these reports can all be scheduled, either associated with an automation, or you can set them up on your own schedules if you want to have something sent out. Now, this is the only way to get information out of the platform. We do have a number of pre-built integrations. So we have things like, common themes, so Splunk, Sumo Logic, but more importantly, we have a bunch of generic destinations. So if you just pick the protocol you want to dump out in and locations. One example of this that I love to highlight is, actually, I don't know if my screen sharing shows that. Yeah, we have some Power BI reports that I was going to use as an example, but you can send this data out, Power BI, any other source that you'd like if you already have systems that you're using to track particular KPIs. And then, of course, there is a REST API as well. So if you wanted to be able to create your own custom integration, you want to be able to pull rather than have us push the data out of the system, then we can absolutely do that with these custom API calls. APIs for organizations that have store platforms in particular, because they've realized that leveraging this repository of scripts that we have for incident response or dealing with emerging threats, it gives organizations a lot of flexibility. And so if you have, say, a detection of something critical, maybe it's by the EDR, it communicates to the SOAR platform, and then the SOAR platform can reach out to us via that API to execute details to S3 bucket. I even had a prototype I was working on for being able to do like a quarantine on a local device. It just gives you a ton of flexibility in dealing with all of that. Now, as we're coming up to the end here, I think just from a management perspective, last things I'll mention are there is role-based access controls across the platform, being able to define teams, users, and then when you have these teams, you can actually change the view to only show the assets, the asset groups associated with that team. So if you're delegating access to someone, that's very helpful. If you have, if you're like an MSP and you have clients, you want to give them view access into only their assets, we give you lots of flexibility if we're doing that. Then last of all, just from more of an administrative perspective, there are robust logs throughout the platform as well. So whether you're tracking events that are, whether or not these assets succeeded or failed on the patching operations that they were running, and then be able to have some troubleshooting errors surfaced up as well to be able to find out why. In this case, yeah, user postpone the patch. So we're just hung waiting for that to be completed. So all in all, that's a high level run through of the vRx platform in less than 30 minutes slightly. Are there any questions that have come up across? Oh, great question. Okay, so assuming the product doesn't scan network devices for vulns. So there is an ability to do unauthenticated scans today. So being able to essentially run Nmap from an unmanaged or from a managed device is something that we can do. So let me pull up one of these. We'll do an exploration. This is unauthenticated data, right? We're not logging into the system, but rather we're just scanning it and then pulling back best guess information based on the open ports, banner grab, the OS fingerprinting, and so on. So it can give you some level of visibility across the network, but it's not authenticated data. We can ingest information from Qualys and Tenable as well. So if you wanted to have like a CSV import from a product like that, that is an option. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if that's everything, I appreciate you joining, spending some time with us today, and getting to know the vRx platform. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. I should have introed myself at the beginning, Landon Tholen, solution architect for Vicarious. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or Landon at Vicarious.io. We're happy to jump on and dig deeper into anything you have questions on. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you very much. Guarantee the actual prioritization of the vulnerability space in a contextual risk environment. So essentially, it's just based on the monitoring that we have. So, with that agent tracking the behavior of the endpoint, we have a definition of like what is considered high usage, and that's what we're using to add to the prioritization method. So we start with the CVSS score as a base level, and then we look at this particular endpoint, how the endpoint is being used. Hey, our admins logged into it, and every single one of those is another add-on to the calculation. And then we look at those CVEs that exist on the endpoint. So on this vulnerability, is it associated with SQL Server, we consider that a database app to be something that you might want to prioritize. So we would add another note onto that to be able to help with prioritization. In the future, we are adding some really cool features to the calculations of the score. So you'll be able to have more things like predictive analytics associated with likelihood of exploitation for particular vulnerabilities, and a lot more context beyond just the definition for the vulnerability as well. So I'm very excited for that. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions, I'll hang on for a few more minutes.